मैं शायद तुम्हारे लिए अजनबी हूँ, मगर चांद तारे मुझे जानते हैं, ये सारे नजारे मुझे जानते हैं. Hi, I'm Sangeeta Bahadur, and you are watching the very first episode of my new series, Tattle Tales, in which I'm going to share with you some strange supernatural stories. Some of them you might find a little scary, others might touch your heart in unexpected ways, and a few others may sound wistful. In fact, a couple of them may even make you chuckle because humor is not really the prerogative of only the living, is it? Many of these stories are sort of personal in the sense that they recount either my own, I must admit, rather limited experience with the inexplicable, or that of family and friends. Others have been derived from legends and folk tales that I have heard during my various postings abroad as a diplomat. But one thing I can assure you of is that each of these stories is totally unique. And of course, I hope memorable. So let's begin, shall we? I'm kicking off the series with a family story that I was literally weaned on. My very first taste of spine-tingling fear. This tale is all about a ring. A ring that almost brought our protagonist to the brink of death, and in any case affected him so deeply that he was never quite the same again. That is why I'm calling this story One Ring to Rule Them All. And those of you who have read R.R.R Tolkien will probably recollect where the reference is from. The Lord of the Rings is what I'm talking about. The other reason why I'm kicking this off with this particular story is also because I'm one of those people who simply cannot resist a beautiful ring. No matter how many I have, I simply have to buy one more if it takes my fancy. And because this is the first episode of this series, you're going to get a little taste of a bonus story that is based on my own experience with a rather beautiful and, I must say, mysterious ring. So let's begin, shall we? It was early winter of the year 1919. The First World War had just come to an end around a year ago. The British had propelled nearly 1.5 million Indian soldiers into a war that had nothing to do with India. Of these, around 120,000 had perished on alien battlefields in the 4 years the war had lasted. Those who had survived the bloodshed were now drifting home after years of being totally cut off from their families, their villages, their communities. Snail mail was, as you know, the only form of communication at that time, and with a war raging the world over, the fate of letters was often bleak. Among these returning veterans was my great-grand-uncle Surya Pratap, who had left behind aging parents, 5 siblings, and a pretty bride he had brought home less than a year before his recruitment in 1914. As he boarded his final late evening train from Patna to Munger, the town closest to his village, he was a bundle of nerves and excitement. Would his parents, his siblings, and his wife even recognize him? He'd survived, sure, but the battlefield had changed him in so many ways. The other passengers made room for him good-naturedly and gradually got through his reserve to draw him into a conversation. They were fascinated fascinated by his war credentials and genuinely sympathetic when he mentioned his lengthy and largely incommunicado absence. As the train approached the Munger station, one of his neighbors asked him the name of his village, and he responded easily, puzzled by the strange reaction he evoked. A bleak silence, with people around him exchanging furtive glances. His questions were met with strained smiles and headshakes. As the train chugged to a halt at the ill-lit, deserted platform, and Surya Pratap picked up his army-issue metal trunk, hold-all, and backpack, one of his fellow passengers called out soberly, "Be very careful, brother. Stay safe. May the gods protect you." The unusual farewell piqued his curiosity, but as he stepped off the train, he shrugged it off. He had a more immediate problem on his hands, finding a porter, or, as the British said condescendingly, a coolie. He couldn't see a soul anywhere. True, Munger was a small town and it was past 10 on a cold October evening. Yes, it had taken him nearly a year and a good chunk of his accumulated pay to buy a passage home from France. Still, he hadn't expected to feel like the last man on earth. A quarter hour went by. He was debating whether to somehow juggle his luggage up to the overhead bridge leading to the exit, or to simply sit out the night at the station, when someone walked out of the darkness shrouding the other end of the platform. As the figure drew closer, the flickering, uncertain light revealed the faded maroon of his clothes and the brass badge glinting on his arm, the typical uniform of a railway coolie. Many of us have also used their services in this day and time because they still wear the same uniform, they still wear the same brass badge, and they still help you carry your really heavy luggage up the stairs and to the car or cab or whichever other vehicle is waiting for you. Surya Pratap breathed a sigh of relief as the man called out, "Need help with your luggage, Babuji?" Now, since the story took place in Bihar, I'm going to be using the local lingo at certain points just to give it the flavor that I grew up with. Surya Pratap nodded quickly, adding that he would also like to find a rickshaw or a tum-tum, which is a one-horse buggy for those of you who don't know, to take him to his village, which was around 7 miles from the town. The tall, bony coolie nodded slowly, dark eyes kindling as he surveyed our man. "That will be tough at this time of the night," he declared in clipped tones. "I'll charge you 3 rupees for carrying the luggage and another 2 for finding you a tum-tum. A total of 5, okay?" Now, 5 rupees was a princely sum at that time. Today, you might be able to just buy maybe a toffee with a 5 rupee coin, but at that time, it was probably more than the coolie would earn after half a day's labor. But Surya Pratap had the money, was desperate to get home, and didn't stop to bargain. The coolie picked up the heavy trunk and balanced it on his thickly turbaned head, and Surya Pratap helped swing the hold-all up on top of the trunk. In the process, he couldn't help but notice a ring the man wore on the first finger of his right hand, a large scarlet stone that looked like a ruby, framed in old, heavy, engraved silver. Something like this, yeah? Except that it was red and this is green. An expensive piece of jewelry for a porter, but maybe it was fake, or perhaps an heirloom from better times. The coolie strode ahead and Surya Pratap followed, stealing another curious look at the darkly glimmering ring. They had already climbed the first few steps of the staircase when Surya Pratap suddenly remembered his backpack. Glancing around, he saw its small shadow lying forlornly halfway down the platform, just where he'd gotten off the train. Wait a moment, he called out to the coolie as he turned to go back. I left my... I can see that, the porter grumbled irritably. Since I don't have all night, let me get that for you. No, I... began Surya Pratap, choking on his next word as an arm, the coolie's arm, reached out past him towards the backpack lying at least 100 yards away. And then the arm, it just went on and on and on till the fingers curled around the bag straps and picked it up. Then the hand, with the silver ring glittering on its finger, retracted, bringing the backpack with it. The coolie nonchalantly dropped it at his feet, a peculiar smile on his face. Without another word, he loped up the stairs with the heavy baggage balanced on his head. For a moment, Surya Pratap stood paralyzed, heart racing with terror and mouth still open in shock. Had his eyes played a trick on him? Had he imagined that impossible interlude, or was the porter not a porter at all? Somehow, he stumbled up the stairs and down the other side of the bridge onto the road below. The coolie walked on for a bit before dumping the luggage on the pavement. Wait here, the man rasped, a brief red flare in his deep, dark eyes reflecting the ruby on his finger. Let me find you a tum-tum. No, gasped Surya Pratap, licking dry lips and trying not to look the coolie in the eye. Don't worry about that. I'll manage. It's late and I'm sure you'd rather go home. So here's your money, 5 rupees, as I promised. He placed the coins in the trunk, unwilling to risk a touch. Leave my luggage right there, please. I'll just wait for a tum-tum to drive by. No way was he going to trust a driver located by this coolie or whatever he was. Storytelling is thirsty work. For a moment, the porter stood looking at him, something hungry and angry lurking in his gaze. Then he picked up the coins and said, "As you wish," before walking back the way he had come. Seconds after the man crossed him, Surya Pratap stole a glance over his shoulder and felt the hair on his nape rise when he couldn't see anyone. He must have slipped into a lane or a building, he tried telling himself, but knew very well that there was nothing but an open stretch of deserted road between himself and the station building. Rattled by the encounter, he scanned the eerily empty road for a likely mode of transport. Nearly half an hour went by before a tum-tum loomed in the distance, the horse's hooves clip-clopping on the road in the intense silence. He called out, and to his relief, the carriage veered towards him, a lantern swinging from its beam. "Going somewhere, Babuji?" the driver inquired as he pulled at the reins. Surya Pratap could only see the man's stocky silhouette in the lantern's dim glow, but that hardly mattered. All he wanted was to get away from this place and go home. So he virtually threw his stuff into the tum-tum and jumped in, gave the name of his village to the driver, and prayed that the man won't refuse to go there so late in the night. To his relief, all the driver said was, "Well, that's handy, isn't it? I live in the next village and was headed back anyway. That's why I'll charge you only 5 rupees, half the normal fare." 5 rupees. Just like the coolie, thought Surya Pratap. And he felt very uneasy, even as he nodded. Coincidence? Or something else? He stared into the dark, lulled by the rhythm of the carriage. For a while, they travelled in silence, and then the driver inquired curiously, "Are you all right, Babuji? The night's cold, true, but you've been shivering constantly. You look pale and unwell. Do you have a fever?" "No," Surya Pratap said quickly, forcing himself to relax. Whatever the coolie was, he was far behind now and couldn't do any harm. "No, I'm not ill. I'm just tired after a long journey and, trying to find a logical explanation for something that happened at the station." "At the station?" the driver repeated, turning his head to look at his passenger, full in the face, dark eyes kindling with interest. "Did someone try to rob you?" "No," Surya Pratap shook his head. The whole instance already beginning to seem like a frightening dream. It was this coolie, the only one I could find. He agreed to carry my luggage and then, prompted the driver when Surya Pratap hesitated, not sure whether to share the bizarre story. "But this man is a stranger," he reasoned, "and it doesn't matter if he thinks I'm crazy. Plus, he needed to tell someone, right? So the story simply tumbled out, the terror receding a bit with the telling." He half hoped the driver would laugh, dismissing the incident as his imagination, but that didn't happen. Instead, the man remarked thoughtfully, "That sounds quite weird. No wonder you look so shaken, Babuji. His arm stretched all of 100 yards, you say? Incredible. And the ring he was wearing? What did it look like exactly?" So Surya Pratap described it in detail. The big red stone set in old silver, the distinctive vine-like design etched on the metal, the way the ruby glowed even in the semi-darkness. He heard the driver chuckle quietly and wondered why the sound beaded his forehead with cold sweat. Without turning around, the driver, perched on his high seat, a good 6 feet away, lifted his right arm, swiveled it at an impossible angle, a full 180 degrees, till it reached Surya Pratap, halting an inch from his staring eyes. The hand he was looking at was perfectly straight and palm down, as though the shoulder itself had turned back to front. On the first finger of that hand flashed a ring, twin to the one the coolie had been wearing, down to the last glint and etching. As Surya Pratap's throat closed with fright, the driver inquired pleasantly in the local dialect, "Ka aisan anguthi? A ring like this?" For an endless minute, our man sat there unmoving, as though the ring hovering under his nose had turned him to stone. Then, his mind screaming in panic, He threw himself out of the moving tum-tum, his scrambling hands just managing to grasp the straps of his backpack as he tumbled hard to the ground. He didn't even notice that he had badly gashed his arm on the step of the carriage and couldn't care less about his luggage. Panting like a coal engine, he began to run in the general direction of his village. Even in his panic, he remembered to zigzag through fields and trees, since the horse could easily outpace him on the narrow, metalled road. He heard the driver call out to him, and his mocking laughter squeezed his already tortured windpipe. But he didn't stop, didn't turn around. The moon rose higher as he stumbled across the uneven ground, falling and scraping his knees and palms. Just when he thought he couldn't run any further, a village loomed ahead. His? He didn't know. But there would be people there, he thought, who would shelter him for the night and keep him safe. The coolie, the driver, and who knew how many more were out there prowling the night for him. He sobbed with relief when he spotted the lantern swinging from somebody's hand as he approached the village boundary. The houses were all dark. Everyone, he surmised, having gone to bed several hours ago. He called out to whoever held the lantern. "Help!" he gasped. "Help me!" The other person called back the local version of "Who goes there?" and the lantern bobbed closer. Soon, a man stood an arm's length from him, shining the light into his pallid, perspiring face. "Who are you? Are you lost?" the man, obviously the village watchman, demanded. "Not lost," panted Surya Pratap, just not sure if this is my home." He said the name of his village and felt his knees buckle with relief when the watchman, no older than 20, nodded tersely. "You are the right place, but who are you? I don't remember seeing you hereabouts." "I left over 5 years ago," Surya Pratap explained, heart and breath beginning to settle as he recognized some of the older cottages and the general lay of the land in the bright moonlight. "Joined the army, fought in the war of the damned Firangis, survived. You'd have been a kid at that time. It has taken me a year to get back, and my family, they don't even know I'm alive, let alone that I've returned. Could you guide me to my house, please? Everything looks different after all this time. Also, I'm not sure I'll be able to make it on my own." "Yes, you don't look well at all." The watchman nodded sympathetically, his own face in the shadows as he surveyed Surya Pratap from head to toe. "You seem to be bleeding too. A lot." Surya Pratap frowned, wondering if he had imagined the excited rasp in the man's voice as he mentioned the blood. "Did you fall? And is that little bag all you're carrying?" "I lost the rest of my luggage along the way," Surya Pratap confessed reluctantly. "Left it all in the tum-tum when I got off." "I didn't see any tum-tum," the watchman stated suspiciously, stepping back warily, well out of reach, deeper into the shadows. I got off a mile away and walked the rest of the way," Surya Pratap muttered. "Could you guide me home now? My father's name—" "Leaving all your luggage," the watchman observed, not moving an inch. Surya Pratap sighed, his stress headache hitting its peak. Something strange happened, and Well, it spooked me badly enough to just jump off the carriage and walk, run actually. You're also bleeding, the watchman pointed out, voice turning cold, a bit odd. Yes, I fell a couple of times, Surya Pratap admitted. That's spooked, huh? The younger man commented a bit derisively. What happened? Tell me, and I'll see you home for 5 rupees, since this is the middle of the night and this is not a part of my job. If not, you can stay right here and wait for morning. 5 rupees. Again 5. For just walking him home was pure extortion. But he agreed. His legs were trembling, his cuts and bruises were hurting like the blazes, and he was too disoriented to get home without help. Quickly, he recounted the whole story. The coolie at the station, the driver of the tum-tum, the identical rings they both wore, their terrifying, inhuman arms, and his own blind flight through the night. His concluding words dripped into a well of silence. He had evidently left the watchman speechless and speculating about his sanity, no doubt. I know how this sounds, he offered abashedly, but I assure you, I'm neither drunk nor mad. No, the watchman reassured him, eyes gleaming in the dark as he stared unblinkingly at him. Surya Pratap shifted uneasily, wishing someone in the nearby cottages would wake up and call out or come out. The silence was a bit uncanny. You appear quite sane to me, and I'm sure it would take a lot to scare a soldier like you. If you believe all this happened, it probably did. The rings those two wore, however, are you sure they were identical? It was the same ring on 2 different hands, Surya Pratap insisted, instinctively covering the deep gash on his arm when the watchman's glowing gaze moved to his bloodied sleeve. I can't explain it unless what? He asked himself. Unless the ring was a gang emblem? Possible. But then what about the rest? What he'd seen, heard, felt? Maybe it's a criminal gang? The watchman suggested, as though reading his mind. And they all wear this ring as a token? Perhaps we should complain to the police. They are all around, but they do nothing. Anyway, would you recognize the ring if you saw it again? Surya Pratap shuddered. I hope and pray that I'll never lay eyes on that cursed ring again, but if I ever did, yes, I would. The silence seemed to intensify, ringing menacingly in his ears. His instinct was to run, but he could only stumble back a few steps. Another sip. Let us be sure of that then, the watchman said in a voice that sounded suddenly different, deeper, kind of raspy. Frozen with fear, Surya Pratap watched him extend an arm across the good 10 steps that now separated them, till it stopped inches from his horrified eyes. On the forefinger of that hand glittered a ring. Big red stone set in old heavy silver traced with a vine design. The exact same ring he had already seen twice before during this night of terror. "Ka aisan anguthi," crooned the watchman, and Surya Pratap, who'd seen death stalk battlefields across half the world, heard himself whimpering like a lost child. With a sobbing cry, he dodged the ghoulish arm and ran, uncaring of where he went, so long as it was away from the monster masquerading as the village watchman, and the tum-tum driver, and the coolie. In his fevered imagination, the three became one, chasing him down the silent lanes. He thought he heard the watchman laugh jeeringly, calling out his name, and ran even harder, weaving through narrow streets till they began to look familiar, the way he remembered his immediate neighborhood from 5 years ago. He looked wildly around, and there, right there to his left, lay the cul-de-sac with just 2 houses, the bigger one belonging to his relatively well-to-do family. He spun on a dime to sprint inside and climb the 2 shallow steps to the little porch, not even aware that the backpack had slipped off his shoulders and lay on the ground several steps away in the short lane. The house was dark, like the others he had crossed, but he beat on the door with maniacal energy, not caring if he woke up the whole village. With that thing roaming the streets in the guise of a watchman, he just wanted in right now. To his vague surprise, the neighbors didn't stir. But he heard movement behind the door he was banging on. He stumbled a bit when it was jerked open. In the pre-dawn gloom, all he could make out was a female figure dressed in a sari, tied village style. His mother? Wife? Sister? "Stop that racket!" ordered the woman irritably, in a voice he had clung to for 5 lonely years. His wife, the bride he'd left behind when he was loaded on a ship going to Europe. "Do you want to wake up the whole neighborhood? Who are you? And what do you want?" "Shanti?" he whispered, voice choked with emotion as his wife glared angrily at him. "Don't you recognize me? It's Surya Pratap, your husband. I'm back from the war and I'm so glad to be home again." The young woman, she'd be 24 now, he recalled, blinked at him before picking up a lantern from the floor beside her and lifting it to his face. In the golden light, he saw her eyes widen and her pretty face flush as she studied him for a moment. "It is you," she gasped. "After so long, after so much has happened, you're back. Oh, stupid me, keeping you standing in the door like this when you must be so tired and hurt. Oh gods, is that a war wound? Did someone attack you on your way here? What happened?" "No, I fell down and cut myself," he explained, warmed by her concern. Shanti had been... "Come in first," she insisted, stepping away from the door. "Come right in, husband, and let me take a look at those injuries. Everyone else is asleep, but what an amazing surprise awaits them. By the time they come out, we will have cleaned and bandaged your arm, any other places, and are you hungry? You must be. When did you last eat? Come into the kitchen. I'll put a pot of khichdi on the fire for you while I deal with the wounds, and you can tell me why you're looking so distraught." Surya Pratap followed her into the house, into the still warm kitchen with its banked fire, aching to hug her, kiss her, the way he'd seen people do in France, in Belgium. That, however, was not the way of Bihari villages, and he couldn't get up the nerve. She sat him down on a low stool, and he watched her briskly fan the glowing embers, setting an earthen pot filled with rice, lentils, and spiced water on the chulha. While his dinner/breakfast cooked, she dealt with the gash on his arm and the cuts on his palms. He didn't tell her about his scraped knees because he didn't want to take off his trousers in the kitchen. She lingered over the injuries longer than necessary, he thought, never raising her eyes from the still bleeding lacerations. An excuse to stay close to him, perhaps? And why were her hands so cold, even with the fire blazing barely 2 feet away? He looked around the place, puzzled that nobody else had come in to investigate the noise they must be making. Like most villagers, his family usually rose very early in the morning. He checked his watch and found it was almost 5 a.m. Surely someone in the household should be stirring by now. Shanti was watching him intently when he glanced at her, her eyes glimmering with some emotion he couldn't name. Where is everyone else? He finally ventured restlessly. Sleeping, Shanti replied, smiling sweetly. I told you, they're all very tired, Only I heard your knocking. The others sleep on. Now, while your khichdi gets cooked, tell me what happened. Why are you looking so strained? How did you fall so badly? How did you get here at this hour? Where is your luggage? That was when he remembered his backpack. It mostly contained the gifts he had carried for the family, for Shanti, and he made to stand up. I lost most of my luggage, he admitted, except for my backpack. I think I dropped it just outside the house. Let me go get it. Sit, husband, she told him, still smiling. It's safe where it is. I shall fetch it for you in a while. First, tell me what happened. He debated spinning some ordinary tale of losing his way in the night, but she was so intently focused on him that he couldn't think of a glib explanation. Hesitantly at first, and then with increasing urgency, he recounted all that had befallen him. He began to tremble involuntarily as he told her about the coolie, the tum-tum driver, and the watchman, about his panicked race through forest and field, the terror of running through the deserted village streets prowled by the creature wearing the watchman's face. He was hyperventilating when he finished, and Shanti handed him a glass of water, her brow puckered with concern. That sounds horrible, she said sympathetically. No wonder you look so distraught. You believe me? He demanded, surprised at her unquestioning acceptance. Why wouldn't I? She asked simply. Why would you come home after so many years with a story like that if it were not true? Has anyone else in the village, maybe a visitor, experienced anything similar? Or am I the only one? He asked. We do not go out anymore, she told him patiently, as though underlining the obvious. And we get few visitors. Why is that? He inquired, a little creeped out by her tone and, yes, even her constant smile. A great deal has changed since you left us, she said, eyes sliding to his wounded arm again. 5 years ago, you say? Yes, he confirmed uneasily. Don't you remember? I remember you leaving, she said. I'm not sure how long ago that was. Your mother died 2 years after you left, so she's not here with us, you see. The news was a fist in his solar plexus. Yes, his parents weren't young when he left them, but his mother had died while he was away. The letter informing him had evidently missed whatever battlefield he was on at that time. How? He managed to ask in a strangled voice. One morning, she simply didn't wake up, Shanti said with no emotion in her voice. She escaped our fate. What? What fate? He asked. And she shook her head. Never mind, she responded kindly. You're here, and that's enough. We've been waiting for so long. Her voice was normal, but he felt the hair on his nape rise. It is good that you escaped those 3 ringed ones and have reached home. We needed you more. You left your satchel, she used the local word, basta. Outside, you say? Let me get that for you before I ask you something. Meanwhile, eat. She placed a plate with piping hot khichdi in front of him and smiled again. That same strangely disturbing smile. He thought she would rise and go out, but she didn't. She just reached out casually. And his heart literally stopped beating as he watched the nightmare unfold again. Her arm, glass bangles jingling, went on and on and on till it passed through the closed door and went beyond. He was mewling with terror when that arm returned through the door, reeled in by the creature who sat across from him wearing his wife's face. The delicate hand now bore the backpack, which she dropped gently at his feet. There now, she cooed, her smile a rictus. I could have charged you 5 rupees for that service, but you are my long-awaited husband, so I won't. And now, the question. The identical rings that you saw those 3 wear, the coolie, the driver, and the watchman, were they something like this? She turned her hand palm down till he was staring at the same ruby and silver ring that had haunted and hunted him through the night. Her eyes glowing the same hue as the stone, and her voice deepening into a rasp. She whispered those horribly familiar words. Ka Aisan Anguti. That was when Suri Pratap passed out, his mind simply collapsing, and he didn't hear the distant sound of birds sleepily welcoming the new day. When he came to, it was broad daylight, and his home was silent and dead, in a state of disrepair he hadn't noticed when he had stumbled in last night. Last night? 2 days ago? 5 days ago? He didn't know. His backpack lay just where Shanti, oh gods, Shanti had dropped it. He picked it up and, head throbbing and throat parched, limped out of a door, half off its hinges, dreading what and who he'd find. There was nobody around. The bright but cool sun illuminated a decaying, silent village, Lanes more rubble than path, houses with broken windows, caved-in roofs, and rotting woodwork. There wasn't a soul to be seen anywhere, not even a stray dog or cat. What had happened here? Where was his family? Why had the village been abandoned? And when? The hair-raising encounters he had had last night? What did they mean? Were they Shanti and the others? Demons? Jinns? Were they ghosts? Did that mean? His teeth chattering, he ran and walked till the abandoned village lay far behind, meeting no one for a good 2 miles. He began to see small hamlets and farmers working in fields. Still too close, he thought, still too close. Light-headed with fear and fatigue, he kept walking, ignoring both pain and thirst. Another mile, and he saw cows crossing the road, their owner clucking at them. He finally dared to call out, and the stringy, sun-baked older man stopped to speak with him. He offered him water from the small gourd bottle he carried and asked him where he was coming from, where he was headed. Surya Pratap told the cowherd the name of his village, adding shakily, "But there was nobody there. My family, neighbors, all gone. I've been away for a long time and I don't know what happened to them." For a long moment, the man said nothing. "They died," he finally sighed. "All but a mother and son who somehow sneaked away midway. They evaded the police barricades to reach our village and told us the heartbreaking story of the 5 villages, yours and 4 others clustered together. We'd all heard of the plague, something that ate through your chest and throat till you couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Very contagious and fatal if not treated properly. The Gora collector panicked and locked down these infected villages. Only one of his Indian clerks was allowed access, carrying medicines prescribed by English doctors for the sick. Unfortunately, this man, I forget his name, turned out to be not just corrupt but utterly heartless. Rather than distributing the medicine for free, as he was supposed to, he declared that he would sell it to the sick for a price. 5 rupees per dose, per person. So, if there were 6 people sick in your family, you were supposed to pay 30 rupees per day for 7 days. You are a farmer's son, yes? Can you think of any farmer with that kind of cash at his disposal? Some paid for 1 dose, some for 2, using whatever little money they had or even a piece of jewelry, but it wasn't enough for that greedy monster. Nobody could get out of these villages to complain to the collector sahib, who wouldn't have cared either way. Indian lives mean little to these Goras. Even their dogs matter more, the cowherd added bitterly. People began to die, whole families wiped out in a matter of days, but the clerk didn't relent. The mother-son duo, who had miraculously escaped infection, stole out in the 2nd week. By then, more than half the population of these villages had died, and the rest were counting their last breaths. Chitas, funeral pyres, burnt day and night. 3 weeks was all it took for 4,000 people to die in agony. When it was all over, the police brought in bonded labor from other villages to pile the remaining dead on communal chitas at night without any rituals
any prayers. Nobody goes that way anymore, and nobody is buying the land even at the administration's throwaway prices. A couple of wayfarers who got lost and wandered too close, they swear there's something wrong with that place. Too many dead people, too much fear and pain. How long ago was this? Surya Pratap asked, tears running unchecked down his face. A little over 2 years ago, the man said. Didn't you see the state of your village when you arrived? It must be falling apart like the others. It was night, whispered Surya Pratap. I saw nothing. He didn't want to relive the horror, but the inexplicable was beginning to make an insane kind of sense. What happened to that man, the clerk? Nothing, the coward said in a hard voice. They say the law has a long arm, but the collector never used it to punish this murderer. He was just transferred to another district. So that's why the demand for 5 rupees, the horrifyingly elongated arms, those who had died terrible, painful deaths, his entire family among them, because of greed and negligence, were still looking for a way to save their already ended lives, and for retribution, latching on to any living soul who came their way. His mother wasn't there because she had died a year before the epidemic, but the others were stuck between worlds. Greed knows no bounds, the cowherd was saying sadly. The woman who escaped told us that he appeared to be quite rich, this clerk, wearing fine clothes and several pieces of jewelry. Just the one flashy ring on his finger could have fed a whole village for a day, she said. And still, he let thousands die because he wanted more. A true monster, that one. And hence, his victims turning into monsters of another sort. Suddenly alert, Surya Pratap demanded, Ring? What kind of ring? Do you know? A big one, said the man. A huge ruby set in heavy engraved silver, worth a small fortune, said the woman. And so, the last piece of the scary puzzle fell into place. The furious, helpless victims had adopted their killer's ring as a sort of emblem, a bitter memory and a promise of death. Because they had been cremated at night, it became their time for hope, for despair, for vengeance. Perhaps dawn had come in the nick of time before all that simmering fury was unleashed on him by what had once been his wife, his family, who died waiting hopelessly for him to return. Someone from the cowherd's village drove a tanga, a slightly smaller tum-tum, and agreed to take him the remaining distance to the station for 2 rupees. The next morning found Surya Pratap in Patna, burning with fever and half delirious, knocking on the door of his mother's nephew, who happened to be my great-grandfather. The stunned and worried family, including my adolescent Nana, that is my mother's father, took him in and nursed him back to health. During the time, a deeply disturbed Surya Pratap told them the whole story. Just once, never mentioning it again to anyone. They were inclined to dismiss it at first as the ravings of a very ill man, but it was much too detailed and consistent with whatever they already knew of the tragedy, so personal for them. Even in that time of war and deprivation, the extinction of 5 villages had made headlines in every local newspaper. Besides, My great-grandfather knew Surya Pratap very well, since they had grown up around each other, and knew that his straightforward cousin was incapable of making up a tale like that. And that is how the story has come down to me through generations. Surya Pratap eventually regained his physical health, found a job, and lived a decent life, but he was never quite the same. Remained a recluse for the rest of his life. Once he recovered, the only thing he insisted on was a full-fledged Shraddh and Tarpan for all the dead, not merely his family. He didn't have anybody's ashes and had never met most of those he performed the rituals for, but he believed it would give them peace and heal the stricken land. Perhaps it did. So, now that you've heard the tale I just recounted to you and are probably pondering over its tragedy and its horror, let me fulfill my promise of a bonus story for you today, because this is the first episode of this podcast. Now this story I'm going to tell you is again about a ring, but this time the ring belongs to me and has been with me off and on, and you'll know exactly what I mean as I recount this story, for the last perhaps 12 years. So how it came into my possession is also something very chancy. I was posted in London at that time, and for some official meeting or the other I was driving up to Edinburgh, and along the way we drove by the Loch Ness, you know, the lake Loch Ness of the Loch Ness Monster fame, which was so beautiful and so captivating and so eerie in so many ways. And just as we crossed the lake, we came across a little village. I don't know the name, but it was picturesque, pretty as a picture, and it had just one street which was full of cafes, restaurants, boutiques, jewelry shops, you know, all kinds of places where tourists would like to go in and buy stuff. So we got off there for a coffee, and this jewelry shop caught my eye because it seemed to be selling not just silverware of all kinds, including silver jewelry, but also replicas of the Loch Ness Monster, which I wanted, obviously. So I went into the shop, purchased a very nice little stone replica of the Loch Ness Monster, and then my eye fell on this large tray of silver rings of all kinds, beautiful, many of them, with stones, with pearls, with etchings and carvings. Some were just plain bands, but all of them very unique and very beautiful. And the shop owner told me that many of these rings were antique, in the sense that, you know, the owners had sold them off at some stage. Some were many years old, some were of recent make, but they were all very unique. So as I said, I can never resist a beautiful ring. So guess what I did? I started browsing through the tray, and among all those beautiful rings, the one that caught my eye was this one. I don't know if you can see it. It's a very simple one, just a silver band. I'll show it to you like this, and it has hearts and dots made all over it, and inside those hearts and dots there are little pieces of emerald embedded. So it's a silver and green kind of a ring. And for some reason, despite the fact that there were many other more ostentatious, bigger, more showy rings available, this is the one that caught my eye. So I just picked it up and wore it straight away, and continued my drive to Edinburgh, finished my meetings, stayed there for a couple of days, and then we drove back to London. And I was so enamored of this ring, I kept wearing it for the next several days, I would say, perhaps, you know, almost nearly a month. And then, as usual, another ring caught my eye somewhere else, so I purchased that, and, you know, there's always the charm of a new acquisition. So I wore that ring for a day, and at night I just took them all off, because by then I was wearing several rings and my fingers were getting just a little tired. So I took them all off, placed them all together on the bedside table, including this one. And I thought, in the morning I would put away the other ring and wear this one again. But when I woke up in the morning, the other 3 rings were there. As you can see, I always wear 4. So the other 3 rings were there, but this one had gone missing. It was nowhere to be found. I looked everywhere. I thought maybe it had fallen off. So I looked under the table, I looked under the bed, I looked under every other piece of furniture in the room. And that was that. I just could never find it again. And for the next several months, I would keep thinking of it, but I thought, well, it's gone now, so no point feeling sad about it. For some reason, I really fell in love with this ring, and its loss really sort of ached within me somehow. And then 6 months down the line, I had gone out for a reception, I think, and I came back late in the evening, entered my room, and there, on my bedside table, exactly where I had put it the night I lost it, lay this ring, all alone, in solitary splendor, just quietly gleaming there. And I'm like, what? Where did this come from? I had looked for it everywhere, trust you me, and I hadn't found it in 6 long months, and here it was right in front of me. So while I was delighted, I was also mystified, but then I told myself, okay, maybe somebody in the house might have found it lying around somewhere and that put it on the table for me. I'll ask them tomorrow, which I did. Only to be told by everyone that they simply had never seen this ring after the night I lost it. And this was the first they were hearing of it, that it had come back. It was very weird. But even then I told myself there must be some explanation, maybe somebody found it then forgot about it. Whatever it was, I was just happy that I'd found the ring. And I wore it constantly for the next 3 months, till once again I had to go out for a wedding or something like that, and I when I was changing my jewelry, I took off this ring, but this time I very carefully put it in a little silk pouch, which I then slipped into my jewelry box, quite certain that it was going nowhere from there. But guess what? The next time I looked for the ring a few days later, the whole pouch had disappeared. No ring, no pouch. And again I went on a mad hunt for the ring all over the house, looking for it everywhere I could think of. Not a sign of it, and nobody in the house had seen it. And I was like, I had personally put it there, I clearly remember, and yet I couldn't find the ring. And then once again, several months later, just when I was packing to go to my next posting, that was back to headquarters, it surfaced again in the most unexpected of places, hidden under, some amount of clothes or something like that. And I was like, did I really put it there? But well, maybe I did. Maybe I just turned absent-minded. So I picked it up, delighted again, wore it back, and came back to Delhi. And this pattern, believe you me, kept on getting repeated. Every time I took the ring off, it would just vanish. And for the life of me, I couldn't find it. The same thing happened when I went from Delhi to Belarus. Again, having carefully packed this ring among the jewelry that I was taking with me, and yet when I reached Minsk and I opened the box where I had put all the jewelry, everything was there except this ring. And I was like, what the hell is going on? And during my posting in Belarus, this happened a couple of times. And then later on, when I moved on to Malta, I wore the ring so that I didn't lose it again. But once I reached Malta, and the stuff was still sort of coming in and we were unpacking and everything. So at some moment, once again, I was like, let me put this ring away for a few days, and I did that. Vanished. For 1 whole year, I couldn't find it. And without that ring, I had to come back to India once again. And even here, I just wasn't able to discover it. I found every other piece of jewelry that I own, silver, gold, whatever it might be, but not this ring. I looked everywhere. And then once again, just 2 months ago, it surfaced in the same jewelry case which I had searched at least 20 times, if not more, not finding it either there or anywhere else. And suddenly I opened that box and there it was, lying in plain sight. And since then, believe you me, I've been wearing this constantly because I don't want to lose it again. And then I sort of started wondering if maybe, that shop where I bought it from, the owner did tell me that many of those rings, many of those other pieces of jewelry were, not really new. Some were antiques, some were heirlooms, some had been sold by people in desperation. And I thought, for all I know, this ring probably belonged to some very vain lady perhaps, or somebody who was madly in love with whoever had given her this ring, maybe a boyfriend, maybe a husband, maybe a fiancé, I don't know what. And then when she passed on, she could not somehow just let go of this piece of jewelry. So she keeps coming back for it, waiting for me to sort of shift my attention somewhere else so that she can just pick it up and take it away with her and maybe, croon over it for the next several months and just enjoy having it back with her. But then because maybe she likes me and maybe she doesn't like to see me sad and mourning the loss of this ring, after a while she decides to return it. And I find it. And then again, when the urge takes her over, she takes it again, just waiting for me to put it aside for a while before she sort of comes and takes it away. And who knows? I don't know if I'm just making this up, but in my mind, I mean. But it has been a very weird experience and not at all scary, no. But there is a kind of a warmth that I feel every time I put this ring on. It's like it was very precious to somebody at some point of time. And she is grateful that I like it so much as well and that I value it and I treasure it. That's why she's letting me keep it. But from time to time, she just can't help stealing it away from me. So I leave it to you to decide what you think about this whole mysterious disappearing ring saga that I've talked to you about. But it's been a sort of strange experience for me, which I have sort of, enjoyed as well. And it has also made me anxious from time to time. And it has sort of given me a peep into perhaps a world that lies a little beyond ours, but which sort of, is interactive with ours, so that this lady, whoever she was, can walk in and walk out. And yet she's always made sure that she's never deprived me of this piece of jewelry because she wants someone to value it just like she did. So, well, I hope you've enjoyed the two stories that I've told you, one more scary than the other. But if you like it, then do come back for the next episode, which will happen next week. And do subscribe, do like, do share with your friends. Let them know that this channel is going to bring you some really interesting and enjoyable stories from around the world and also from my own family. And the next one will probably be even more interesting than this one. So have a good week, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon. Thank you.